actually recording. Okay, so for the folks who haven't met me before, this is what I say about myself. In the context of this program, I guess the last the business card there at the bottom is possibly the most important credential. I look after Genos International's emotional intelligence business outside Australia and New Zealand. And I've been around mindfulness and mindful leadership for a great number of years. I'm a qualified search inside yourself instructor. Last week, you'll have seen this. And again, I'm sorry, I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but I just want you to think about why did you come to this program? What did you want to get from it? Because there was something that made you sign up for this. You, like me, you get lots and lots of invitations to lots and lots of these events. And here you are, either live or listening to a recording. And so there must be some reason that you tuned into it. And I would encourage you to revisit the reason that you wanted to come along to this and think, is it worth committing to this session 100% while you're on it? Because what I tend to do, I have to tell you, and what the majority of people tend to do with these sort of sessions is they put them on in the background and then they go off into another tab and they do their email, they do their research, whatever they have to do, and they catch up. And honestly, our brain, it's not capable of multitasking. So I guarantee you, particularly with experiential content like this, if you do that, you're not going to get what you wanted from this session. Now, last week, I did this little announcement, and the technology, and this is great, it monitors when people leave their screen. Don't worry, it's not Big Brother. We're not watching everybody individually, but it tells me afterwards how engaged you were. And it gives a percentage figure. And across the 2 sessions last week, we had 84% engagement, which means that 84% of the time, people were on their screen. So for that, I thank you. Honestly, you'll get the best results out of it if you kill your phone, lock the door, disconnect from everything that's going around or going on around you, and just give time to get whatever it was you wanted to get from this program. And in fact, in the spirit of something we said last week, as we're talking now, just set the intention. Set an intention for this program. What do you intend that this program will achieve for you? So set that intention for your brain so that your brain understands why you're switching everything off and why you're ignoring the phone when it buzzes or bings or bongs. So with no further ado, let's start where we're always going to start at each of these sessions. You have all come in either from first thing in your morning and you're buzzing with the opportunities of the day or the challenges of the day, or some of you are coming in at the end of your day. Either way, you're coming in with a lot going on in your head, I suspect. So let's just break that disconnection, and we're going to break that disconnect from what's going on there so that we can truly be present here in the room. And we're going to do that using 2 techniques that we visited last week. And for the purposes of those who are on the call for the first time, I'll go into a bit more detail. Over time, I'll just basically call them out, tell you what they are, and let you get on with them. But let me just suggest to you, first off, just put your feet flat on the ground, okay? And in a comfortable way, and just sit upright in a kind of a pose that suggests to your body that you're going to pay attention. Now, I don't mean militaristic, and I don't mean stiff. I just upright, just not slouched back, which sends a different message entirely. And just plant your feet flat on the ground. Put your hands symmetrically, maybe in your lap, and just allow your attention to drop down to your feet on the ground. I don't mean visualize your feet. I don't mean look down to your feet. I mean, just reach out with your mind, if you like, and notice whatever is going on with your feet. You may notice sensations, hot or cold, tingling. You might notice your foot in contact with your sock or your shoe, and in turn with the ground. There might be a sense of gravity. There's no right or wrong. And by the way, you might sense into your feet and sense nothing. There is no right or wrong. That's okay. But just notice what's going on there. Let me go quiet for a few seconds while you do that. And as you're doing that, I just encourage you to notice that in actual fact, at any time, at any point in time, it's something we'll explore in the program later, you can reach out and sense into any part of your body and notice what's going on. And in fact, at the end of today's session, we do more of that. And you can notice what sensations are going on. You can sense into it and feel exactly how that body is experiencing the world, that part of the body is experiencing the world at a point in time. But for now, just notice your feet. And as you notice the sensations of your feet, I encourage you, just think of your attention as if it was maybe like a torch beam or a laser beam. And at the moment, it's focused upon your feet, sensing any sensations there. Let's move it up along, up to your seat, up to where you're behind touches the chair. And just notice what sensations are there to be noticed. So when you bring your attention and you just allow yourself to notice your behind on the chair, your thighs on the chair, what sensations do you notice? Maybe you feel your clothing in contact with your legs, and in turn in contact with the chair. Is there heat or cold? Any twitching or itching or sensations? As I sit here, I notice the weight of my body down on, let's call them the sit bones. I just notice that sense of being planted on the chair. And the key is not to find any special experience, just to notice that you can notice. And as you do that, I just encourage you to let everything go. You know, if you're holding yourself tense at all, just notice anywhere you're tense and let go. And as you do that, we're going to take 6 breaths. And on these breaths, you're not going to, fill up your lungs that way. I'm just going to encourage you to make them a little bit deeper, just a little. But more importantly, as they come out, to make them as long as you can. Ideally, as much as twice as long in the out breath as they are in the in. So as you breathe in, if in your mind you're counting 1, 2, on the out breath, you go for 3, 4. And just a few breaths like that, where the out breath is longer than the in breath. And just go with that for a moment. And trust me, I'll explain this if you haven't heard it before. Not pushing the breath, just allowing it to go in a little bit deeper than normal and out maybe a little bit slower than normal. Just for a couple more breaths. And now on the next breath, just see if you can follow the breath all the way into the body, paying attention to it as it goes in through your nose. Your lungs inhale, or your lungs inflate. Your stomach rises, your chest rises. Noticing all that going on. Noticing the breath going out again. Just one more time, following that cycle, just following the breath all the way in through the nose, down into the lungs, noticing the chest and the abdomen rising. Notice it going back down. And on the next breath, just come back to the screen and let's leave that behind us. So what was that about? For those of you who were last week, you'll have heard that I spoke about a couple of techniques. The seated feet is just simply designed to break distraction with the outside world. Reality is you are a single tasker. Your brain can only focus on one thing at a time. When you want to bring yourself present for a meeting, for a presentation, for anything where you want to be focused, bringing your attention to your seat or your feet is a great way of doing that, because in the moment that you bring attention to your seat or your feet, you're absolutely here. Those long breaths, where I said make the out breath a little bit longer, that just settles, triggers your parasympathetic nervous system, and quite simply it switches off that jitteriness that sometimes comes as a result of the excitement of a day, beginning or end of a day. And again, it's just about getting you into the moment and starting to settle you. And you'll recognize from last week, we were just following the breaths as I cycle in and I cycle out. And again, that's just breaking distraction with the outside world. And when we put these together, these three pieces, the 6 breaths that we looked at last week, and we spoke about using a kind of Lego analogy with the seat and feet, and then with attention to even 1 or 2 breaths, it's what some people, including myself, call the purposeful pause. And this is something that I use, for example, just before I go on the presentation. They're talking, they're about to introduce me, I'm standing off stage, I'm bringing attention to my seat, my feet, I'm breathing, I'm watching a few breaths, and that's a great way of calming down before a tough call. If any of you make cold calls, before you make those calls, tough meetings, etc. And every time also, you're about to start a new job. You're in the middle of not a new job, a new task in the middle of your day, and you're going from one task to another. It's a great way to start. Now, let me encourage you to grab your pen, and I'm going to share with you 2 apps. Please, 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 don't go and get them now. Don't go and look into them now. They'll still be there when we finish the session. Just write down the Potential Project app. And this is one of my favorite apps. It's useful for as we build your practice because it has a reminder built into it. And a reminder comes randomly on whatever frequency you put it, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and it rings a bell. And what I'm going to encourage you to do at the end of this session is, as you work through the week, if you get the Potential Project app, to set up the random bell for a frequency that suits you. And when the bell rings, just to do one of these. Take a few breaths, bring attention to your seat and your feet, watch your breath going in and out. I want to encourage you to notice what effect that has on your day. So that's the first one I wanted to mention, Potential Project app, and it costs a massive sum of $1 US 99. And here's a second one which you'll use as you work through this program later on. This is a timer for when you start meditating without the aid of the recordings we're giving you. And it comes from the Insight Meditation Center in Boston, as far as I recall, and it's completely free. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful app. Fantastic number of teachers contribute guided meditations to it, but the timer in it is outstanding, well worth getting. Again, please don't go and get it now. Please don't go onto your phone now. Stay with me. So I mentioned last week, this is where we're going in the platform, on the program. We're focused upon performance, leadership, and well-being. How to be an effective leader that drives performance without breaking your health. And we're using tools like mindfulness and neuroscience to create greater emotional intelligence for ourselves, a resource of emotional intelligence in ourselves that we can access to achieve these goals. We're going to do that in the context of the Genos EI model, because it's very useful for you to be able to say, here's where I am at this point in time, here's how people perceive me. Now, as I work through the program, here's what I want to focus on. And we're going to look at inspiring performance as we work through these few weeks, self-awareness, awareness of others, self-management, emotional reasoning, all dimensions of emotional intelligence. So by the time we get to the back end of this program, not only will you have a vision of where you see yourself as a leader in the future, but you'll have worked your way through a plan that looks at how you increase your self-awareness and awareness of others and self-management and so on and so forth. And of course, for those of you who don't know what that is right now, or those things are right now, that's okay. That's going to be covered. Here's more or less where we're focused today. A little bit of mindfulness. We're going to be looking at your leadership vision and inspiring performance when we look at your results, and a bit of self-awareness. As I said last week, and some people have joined us, some of you already have experience of this material. As you hear me say things that you've heard before, there may be a tendency to tune out. And my experience is every time I hear this, no matter how many times I hear it from different voices, there's something new to be learned. So what I would encourage is, please bring a beginner's mind, bring a as if you had never heard of any of this before, the curiosity that comes with that. So first thing I want to do is sell you on the benefit of emotional intelligence, because I'm going to ask you to positively engage with a development plan that will see you improve the way you show up to people from an emotional intelligence point of view. But there's no way you're going to stick with that unless you really believe there's something valuable in that for you. So grab your pen and paper, because we're going to go back in time. And I'm going to take you back to times when you've experienced people of high and low emotional intelligence. Now, let me just get my chat box up there. 1 second. You'll understand why in a few moments. So I want you to think now. Think of the best boss you ever worked for. Okay? If you haven't had a boss that you'd regard as a really, really good boss, well, think of the best coworker you've ever worked with, or the best mentor, coach, teacher, but ideally the best boss you've ever worked for. Okay, have you got that person's name in mind? Write it down on your paper to keep it front and center in your mind. And please don't just listen to this exercise. It's really important that you engage with it and actually work with the pen and paper as we work through. You'll get much more from it. In a few moments, I'm going to read out 6 statements. They're behaviors. And I'm going to ask you to think of that best boss and think of the extent to which she or he demonstrated those behaviors. And if they demonstrated them more than would be typical of the majority of people, well, then I'm going to ask you to give them a score of 5. So if they significantly more than others, they demonstrate that behavior, give them a score of 5. If it's significantly less than others, you'll give them a score of 1. And if they're about the same as others, a score of 3. And let me give you an example. I'll just give you one story around the first one, and then the rest of them we move through quickly. So the first one is demonstrates awareness of the mood and emotions. I was in a meeting not so long ago with a colleague, and it was one of those meetings where we knew there was going to be some conflict. And so you're always a little bit head up when you know there's going to be that. Even if you like conflict, your amygdala is buzzing and the hair's standing on the back of your neck. And we went into session well prepared, the way you should when there's going to be a little bit of a Barney or a little bit of a disagreement. And just about 2-3 minutes in, as the session was starting to get heated and the other side were starting to say things that, were raising the temperature in the room, my colleague got up and she excused herself to go to the bathroom. And in that moment, I felt really exposed. I felt like I'd be left swinging in the wind, because it's just getting heated. They're just starting to say these things, and she gets up and she leaves. And I thought, yeah, not great timing. Thanks a million. And she came back in after about 2 minutes, sat back down. We continued on with the meeting. We finished up. And when we were talking afterwards and doing a debrief for the meeting, which worked out well, I said, you know what? I really, man, when you walked out of the room, I really just nearly panicked that I kind of felt left alone. It was unfortunate timing. And she said, she said it was quite deliberate. She said, some of the things that were being said were getting me really ticked off. They were getting me wound up. And so I was afraid I was going to say something that I might later regret and I couldn't take back. So I just excused myself. I went down to the bathroom. I washed my hands. I looked at myself in the mirror. I took a breath. I came back in and I sat down. Now, she demonstrated awareness of her mood and emotions to a level that I'd say I'd give her a score of 5, because she knew she had been triggered. She knew she was being wound up. She knew the effect that things were having on her. So thinking of your best boss, to what extent did he or she have that awareness of a mood and emotions? 5, extremely high. 1, extremely low. 3, typical. So give it a score, and please do write down scores. I'm going to need you to interact with this part of the process in a few moments. 5 others I'm going to go through without stories. Makes others feel appreciated. To what extent did this person make others feel appreciated? Did they catch you doing things right and call it out in front of the group? 5 is everybody felt really appreciated all the time. 1 is nobody felt at all appreciated ever. Is open and honest about mistakes. It's very easy to be open and honest about mistakes that don't cost you anything, that don't cost your reputation, basically don't cost you anything. So, but was this person honest even when it didn't serve them well? It was me, it was me, it was me. 5 is brutally honest about mistakes. 1 is always probably looked for somebody else to blame. 4, did the right thing, made ethical decisions, made moral decisions. And it's easy, again, to do the moral thing and the ethical thing when there's nothing at stake, when it doesn't cost you. To what extent does this person do the right thing, even when it was tough? 5 is significantly more than others, highly ethical. 1 is not ethical at all. When this lady, my colleague, noticed that she was getting triggered, she managed her emotions very simply. She said to herself, I'm getting ticked off. I'm going to say something I regret. She got up and she left the room. So that sort of person, I would give a 5, manages their emotions effectively in difficult situations. A person who's a 1 is like a firework. It's the boss who, when anything goes wrong, boom, they explode. So if it's a good day, they're in great form. If it's a bad day, they're in bad form. And we're all like that to an extent, but thinking of that best boss, would you say he or she was a 5 in the way they managed emotions, or a 1, or somewhere in between? And finally, to what extent do they recognize others' hard work and achievements? Recognition is so critical. 5 is they went out of their way to do that. And 1 is they never noticed. So if I've done my job right, you just gave a score between 1 and 5 on 6 of these, so you'll have a score somewhere between 5 and 30. Just tot it up and have that score ready to go in a moment. Now, let me ask you, you have a little put your hand up facility there. And I just want to ask you, is there anybody you know, I'm not going to ask for names, who when they walk into the room, they suck the energy, the enthusiasm, the positivity out of the room, that they really, look at that, the hands are good, oh, boom, 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 hands are going up. You know exactly what I mean. Okay. So I'll get Aoife to put the hands down. Thank you. I mean, it's like a pinball machine with these going. So we're going to get them to take the hands down. That's great. And similarly, let me ask you another question. Do you know anybody who, when they walk in the room kind of smiles a little bit? It gets a little bit more light, more positive. Yeah. And you all do. And I see the hands going up there as well. The way we show up impacts the way people feel. They call it emotional contagion. Bottom line is the way you behave dramatically impacts other people. I want you to think about how you felt when you were around this best boss, and just write down 3 words for me. 3 words to describe how you felt when you were around them. Maybe how you felt when it was Sunday night and you were thinking of going into work with them, or you were on the car or on the bus on the way in there. Did you feel down, depressed, overwhelmed, or did you feel positive, upbeat, etc.? And just write them down on your piece of paper. Just 3 words, just very, very quickly, that describe how it felt to work around that person. Okay, so what was it like to work around that person? And then one final question about that best boss. You may be familiar with the term discretionary effort. If you're not, don't worry. We talk about employee engagement. Everyone on this call, I suspect, knows that employee engagement means the extent to which employees want to give the very best they can. And a lot of that, the motivation to become engaged like that, to do the very best job you can do, comes down to the relationship they have with their boss. In fact, our research shows that more than 50% of the scores in employee engagement surveys come down to the relationship an individual has with their boss. Now, I'm going to ask you to rate yourself on a level of discretionary effort. Now, I'm not asking you to rate yourself on how hard did you actually work, because many of you will go the extra mile because that's who you are. What I want you to tell me on a scale of 1 to 10 is, to what extent did this person motivate you to give that discretionary effort? 1, 2, 3 is they hardly motivated me at all, and maybe they demotivated me and made me not want to give any effort at all. Or 8, 9, 10, I was highly motivated. So to what extent were you motivated by this person to give your very best? So give that a number between 1 and 10. So if that was Luke Skywalker, let's do this for the Star Wars people. Let's go to Darth Vader. Let's go to the worst ever boss you worked for. And I bet that person popped into your mind right away. You can write their name down if you think you're going to forget it, but I have a sense that you're unlikely to forget that person very quickly. And we're going to do the same exercise. I want you to think about the way they showed up. I want you to think about the way they behaved. and rate them from 1 to 5 in terms of how often they demonstrated these behaviors. So to what extent did they demonstrate awareness of their mood and emotions? Okay, so at the one end, it means they had zero appreciation. They just had no idea the way situations and people were impacting. And 5 was they were very, very switched onto it. 2, did they make other people feel appreciated? 5, all the time. 1, never. 3, yeah, okay. 3, by the way, is average. And I'm not sure if you've ever felt complimented by being told you're absolutely average. If you go back to school and your teacher told you, Deiric, you're an absolutely average student, you probably didn't feel complimented. So 1 is high, 1 is low, 5 is high, and 3 is average. Is open and honest about mistakes. Do they take responsibility for their screw-ups? Or is their knee-jerk reaction to find somebody to blame, perhaps, as an alternative? To what extent did they make ethical decisions? Do the right thing, even when it was tough? Because ethics are easy when there's nothing at stake. But when making the right decision doesn't serve you, that's when you know if somebody has ethics, if they're moral, if they're prepared to make the right decision, if they're authentic. To what extent do they manage their emotions effectively in difficult situations? At one end of the scale, the 1, they're a firework. Something goes wrong, it's like lighting the blue touch paper, boom, and they go up. At the other end, Zen master. No matter what goes wrong, don't worry, man, we can work our way through it. Let's take a breath and think about it. 5 high, 1 low. And 6 recognizes other hard work and achievements. Okay, so give that a score. It'll be somewhere between, what will it be? It'll be somewhere between 5 and 30, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Again, write down 3 words for what was it like to be around this person? Did you feel joyful, excited, upbeat, happy, or did you feel down, depressed, negative, or something else? Don't use my words necessarily. So just write down 3 words that represent how they made you feel. I'll give you a few seconds for that because this is important, and it's good to get this on paper because this makes a strong point that you really, about you, that you really need to understand. And then finally for this worst boss, not how hard did you work. You're a good person. You probably try to do the best you can in any situation, but how much did this person contribute to motivating you to get the best results? 8, 9, 10, wow, I would have run through a brick wall for them. 1, 2, 3, I was there for the check month to month. That was the full extent of my motivation. Okay, now here's where you start to interact. There's a chat box there, okay? And I'm gonna ask you, key into the chat box, what was the score that you had for your best boss? So please key that into the chat box right now. Give me a couple of them. 27, 27, 26, 25, 23, 22, 23, 28, 25, 26, and so on and so forth. Are you noticing a trend? Well, I do this exercise worldwide, and what you tend to get is usually north of 25, almost always north of 20, and certainly always, well up high into double digits. So I just want you to notice that this this best boss is scoring typically at I think the lowest score I've seen so far, and don't shoot me if I'm wrong. Rosalie in Spain just said, 31. So obviously it was a pretty good boss. I like that. Okay, so what was your score for your worst boss? So key that in now. 14, 6, 3, God help us, there is no 3. 11, 18, 10, yeah, so okay, so we got a lot of double digits. The highest I saw going by there so far was a 5. The lowest I saw going by there so far was a 3, which is actually not possible with the scoring scheme, but I take your point. Somebody put negatives in. We always get people who ask, and Jonathan put 4 in, so he obviously gave a -1 on one of those. So, and here's what to notice. First off, good boss scored high 20s. Bad boss, the one that you experienced as the worst boss you ever had, scored mostly down into double digit or single digits, and if not low double digits. And in some cases, some of you didn't do as badly as others. Some of you had 14s and 15s there, which means that they weren't a million miles away. They were only about, well, oh, sorry, I was going to say, they were only about half of the good boss. There's still quite a difference, but it wasn't as dramatic as some. But the whole point is there was a difference. Notice that. The only difference so far is we just gave you one set of behaviors and we asked them to rate them. Now, how did your best boss make you feel? Please share some of those numbers with me, or some of those words with me. So key those into the session, into the chat box. What words did you put down for how that? Happy, appreciated, fun, confident, respected, engaged, empowered, supported, calm, safe, festive, energized, motivated, energetic, seen like I matter, comfortable, and part of the vision, support. Whoa. And that's all just plugging up there. And here's the bottom line. They made you feel pretty damn good, okay? And I want you to notice, first off, there's a correlation between the way that person showed up and the way they behaved, the behaviors they demonstrated, and how they made you feel. And that's the first important learning I want you to see in this. And then a star, free, encouragement. These are all fabulous. You can feel, as I'm reading these, I feel my mood lift. Let's go to the dark side. What about the worst boss? What words did you write down there? My input wasn't valued, tense, negative, sick, worried, tense, anxious, undervalued, desperate, inspired, like a dick, thank you, false, negative, puzzled, negative, lost, judged, uncertain, apathetic, hospitalized, feared, down, depressed, demotivated, disrespected, uncomfortable, confused, angry. See the pattern? Okay. So the way we show up is a dramatic impact. Now, that person was being paid probably more than you were, specifically to get you to engage, to get the best results from you. And just looking at the very last ones, actually the very last ones, thank you, Joke, left the job. That says it all. Confused, depressed, demotivated. They literally drove you in exactly the opposite direction. So the way we show up, and here's the critical point, the way we behave has a direct impact on the way other people feel. And that has an impact where it really matters. So tell me, give me a score for the best boss. Now, the best boss, what did you score them for their motivation, for their ability to motivate? 10s, 9s, 8s, 8s, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 8, 7, 9, 8, 8. Again, nice little pattern starting to come up here, 10s and so on and so forth. And some of you are blessed. 180, thank you, Bryn. 180. So what a wonderful experience. And I know exactly what you're talking about, Bryn. I had a boss in my former company, a man called Jim Serbasco, who sadly passed away a few years ago. And he had exactly that sort of impact on you. What about the worst boss? What sort of number did you get? 1, 3. There are no minuses. Thank you. Who was that? It went by too quick. 0, 4, -10, zip. 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 4s, 2s. And when I do this worldwide, sometimes it'll actually go up as much as 4 or 5. And people will say, they scared the life out of me, so they motivated me. That's not motivation, because you did what Yoke did. You got out of the job as quickly as you can, if that's what they were doing to you. So let's look at what we've looked at so far, right? The difference between those two people was simply the behaviors they demonstrated. Some of them demonstrated those 6 behaviors really, really frequently. The worst case, or the worst boss, didn't demonstrate them much at all. So the way they behaved directly impacted the way you felt. In one session, and several months ago when I was recording this, somebody put into the worst boss thing. They said, and I didn't think it was funny, it was kind of black comedy, if you like. They said, like, they made me feel like killing her or me. And that's the impact that somebody can have on you, that they can take it, that somebody can take you and make you feel like self-harming. And somebody who puts that down, I suspect there's more than a small grain of truth in it. So the way we show up has a dramatic impact on the way people feel. The way they feel has a dramatic impact on what we as leaders, what everybody who manages people are paid to do, and that's to engage them. It has direct impact on their engagement, and the way they engage determines everything, the outcome of that relationship. Now, we're talking about business, but this is the same with your kids. It's the same with your significant other. It's the same with your friends. The way you show up affects the way people feel, or the way people feel. The way they feel affects the way they engage, and the way they engage affects everything else. And I love this lady. Maya Angelou, because she said it just about perfectly. She said, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so that good boss came in some mornings like a bear with a sore paw. And what you said was, give her space. She's something wrong. This is not her. Some mornings, the bad boss or the worst boss came in, probably in great form, and you thought, what's she looking for? What's going on here? We never forget how people made us feel. And that is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence in a business sense or a personal sense or interpersonal sense is about managing the way we make people feel. And what you did just now was you used the Genos emotional intelligence model to measure the demonstrated emotional intelligence of those two bosses. Because what I did was I took from each of the 6 scales in the assessment, I took just one item. So self-awareness. Self-awareness is the extent to which you are aware of your mood and your emotions and the way that they're affecting decisions that you make, the way you show up, and the things that you say. So we took one item off that, and you scored your good boss and your bad boss against that. Now, I just want to bring something to bring your attention to something. No, I'll do it when we come to the report. So second one was we took an item from awareness of others. Awareness of others is the extent to which you're aware of others' moods and emotions and how they're affecting the way they are speaking and the way they're showing up and the decisions that they make. And the item we used there was makes others feel appreciated. Authenticity is the extent to which you are seen to do what you say you're going to do and to basically to show up in a genuine, trustworthy manner. And we used is open and honest about mistakes. Emotional reasoning is the extent to which you take account of yours and other people's emotions when you're making decisions. The extent to which you say, okay, I need to be aware that Deiric is impacted by this decision. That's going to have an impact on the way he views it. So I need to take that into my decision process. And we looked at the extent to which somebody makes ethical decisions. Almost there, we looked at self-management, the extent to which a person manages difficult emotions in everyday situations. So you can see there the extent that we looked at the extent to which they manage their emotions in everyday situations. And then finally, we looked at really positive influence and how they inspired performance. And recognition is one of the strongest ways that we do that. Now, you just completed an assessment that had 6 items in it. But the one that you completed online had 42 items because each of these scales had 7 items to flesh that out. Because in the real world, not everybody is binary like your best boss or your worst boss. Most of us live somewhere in between. And so with those 7 items, we can get a snapshot of how do people see you show up. So when you went through that report, we're going to tell you, your report is going to tell you, how are you making people feel? Because they're looking and they're telling you, here's the way I see you behave. That tells you how you're making them feel, and that tells you the extent to which they're engaging with you. So this is important stuff. Now, this is the time when you want to get your report in front of you, and we're going to do a quick tour through the report. And what I want to do is get you to a point where when you go away this week, that you can go away and think about what is the most important piece of 2 pieces of information in that for me that I really want to focus upon as I go through this program. So get your report ready to go, either the sample report for Sally Sample or or your own report. And there's a small number of people on the call who also have a self-only report. Your report is slightly different layout to the 180 that I'm going to walk through, but the content from the point of view of understanding the scoring is pretty much the same. So let me drop out of that, and I need to go into my, I actually thought I had that already, pardon me. It seems that I closed that down. SOPPORTUNITY.com. Make sure my spelling is correct. No, it's not. Sorry about this, folks. I must have closed down the report by accident, and it is sample 180. Good. And here it comes. And I think what I'll do is I'll just grab that report down onto my machine so I have more flexibility. Download. There we go. Just give me one moment. It's going to open up. Super. Okay, great. So get your report in front of you. I'm going to give you a quick tour. I'm going to go through this faster than I normally would go through it in a regular debrief because we're more time strapped. We'll show you some other resources you can, if you want to dive into this a little bit more deeply. Turn first off to page, let me see, page 3. And on page 3, you'll see the wheel that we just looked at. And you saw that we've already used some of the items in this. There are 6 scales there. You're going to become more familiar with them as we work through over the next couple of weeks. What I want to really bring your attention to at this point is this outer ring, the gray one, and the inner ring, the white one, okay? Now remember I said self-awareness is the extent to which you're aware of your own mood and emotions and the extent to which they are impacting your decisions you make, the behaviors you deploy, and the things that you say, okay? And we measure that by looking through the eyes of somebody else, and we say to them, to what extent do you see Deiric demonstrate these 7 behaviors? And people who are highly emotionally intelligent and experienced as highly emotionally intelligent demonstrate more of those behaviors more of the time. It's that simple. Now, so at the high end, on those days when you are demonstrating more of those emotionally intelligent behaviors, people around you experience you as being present. When you're demonstrating the 7 behaviors on awareness of others, people experience you as being empathetic. When you're demonstrating the 7 behaviors that are on the authenticity scale, they experience you as being genuine and so on. So you get the sense, this is about you, of course, but it's about how you impact others. So when you look at this report, remember that you're looking through other people's eyes at how they experience you. And the higher you are on the scale, the closer you are to being experienced as somebody who is present, empathetic, genuine, expansive, resilient, and empowering. And if you read any of the leadership literature right now, people who are experienced as present, empathetic, genuine, expansive, resilient, and empowering get results. That is the very essence of leadership. On those days, and none of us are perfect every day or imperfect every day, on those days when, for example, you don't demonstrate any of those awareness of others behaviors, those 7 behaviors that are on that awareness of other scales, people experience you as sensitive. When you're not demonstrating the authenticity ones, they experience you as being untrustworthy and so on and so forth. So our goal as we work through here, when we're building usable, useful, practical, emotional intelligence, is to figure out, how am I showing up right now? How are people experiencing me? Are they experiencing me at this end or this end? And what do I need to do if I don't feel happy that I'm far enough away from this end and close enough to this end? And the good thing is if any of your scores show you something that you're not happy with, the difference between the high score and the low score is simply behavior. It's simply demonstrated behavior. So you can work upon it. The outer ring there we refer to as productive leadership being states, and the inner circle unproductive leadership being states. So remember, this is looking through the eyes of other people. Okay, turn your page over, and I'm going to show you a sample. This is not, this is just to give you an idea of how these results are laid out. You've already completed the assessment, many of you. For those of you who haven't, let me tell you, first off, we do exactly what we did in that EI experience. We ask you, or we ask the people who feed back on you and you to rate you on those 42 behaviors. And we say, to what extent does Deiric demonstrate them? Significantly less than others, up to significantly more, just like the exercise, okay? So every person who fed back on you, including you, rated you on those 42 items between 1 and 5. And we averaged that out on this, I call this a helicopter view, this summary scale. But there's one other thing we do as well. We also ask them, how important is it to you that Deiric, for example, demonstrates awareness of his mood and emotions? We want them to tell us the extent to which they want or need you to show up in that way. And that's great, because the people who fed back and you're saying, here's my ideal, here's where I see Deiric. And if there's a gap, be happy. And be happy because the gap gives you an ability to improve into. It gives you an ability to focus upon. And it's all just about looking at the behaviors that are difference between what they'd like to see and what they're seeing. So level of importance, there you can see is 4.5. They're saying it's pretty darn important. And the level of demonstration is 3.8. There's a gap. So you notice where the score is here, where the score is here, there's a gap. And it's in that gap that we're going to work over the next several weeks. One other box I want to draw your attention to, less important for this program, but interesting nonetheless, is this benchmark box. And this just represents the range of scores that are typical of people who complete this assessment. So the first, in the first instance, we say to the people who fed back in you, how important is it to you that Deiric does this, and how well does he demonstrate it? And we look at that gap. But this looks at, and how does that perceived or that demonstrated level of emotional intelligence compare to people in the outside world? If it's below that box, it means you're lower than is typical. If it's inside that box, about the same. If it's above that box, you're higher than typical. So moving right along, keeping it moving. Don't forget, you can always pop questions in the box if you need, but I'm going to keep this moving at a pace. Now, if you find there's a gap in that big scale between the top and the bottom, well, then it means that, you know, some of the behaviors were probably rated high and some of the behaviors were rated low. So we break them down behavior by behavior. Okay, so under self-awareness, for example, here we have understands the impact their behavior has on others. Importance rating, they gave it a 4.4. Demonstrated rating, they gave it a 3.2. And we calculated D for difference. Notice there are three colors here. If the difference was very small, it's green. It means they're pretty much getting what they like. It's pretty much aligned. Keep doing what you're doing. If the gap is a little bit bigger, well, then it's yellow. And it means there's some misalignments, pay some attention to it. But if it's red, it's a screamer. It says, pay attention here. Whatever it is they're looking for, they're not seeing you demonstrate it. And so as we work through the report, I'm going to encourage you to be targeting in much of the time on these reds and these yellows, but to be paying attention to the greens as well, okay? Because you do a lot of things well already. Here's the benchmark box. We look at that item by item as well. If you fall below that score, below what's typical, there's a down arrow. If there's a side-by-side, there's, or if it's inside that box, there's a side-by-side, and if it's outside or above the box, there's an up arrow. So let's go into your results. And we're going to start looking at your results. Now, if you're watching this on a recording, please take out the report and actually work with me through this process. Don't just watch it passively. You won't get the value. If you're on the recording right now and or on the session right now, and you're thinking, yeah, I'll just sit back and cruise on this part, please don't. Engage with your report on this. So one final thing I want to talk to you about is familiarity. We ask, and consistency, we ask the people who fed back on you to answer a few questions that indicates the extent to which they feel familiar enough to be able to feed back on you. Hopefully you pick people who know you well enough to be able to do that. If this is somewhere above that right-hand line there, well, actually a little bit smaller, somewhere above 25%, we say we're good. The people who fed back said they're entirely comfortable, that they're familiar enough with you to be able to feed back. And you can see on this that the score is pretty high. And if it's lower, don't worry too much about it, but later on in the program, we'll talk about the implication of that. The other thing is, the scores that we feed back from other people are an average of all of their scores. And when you get an average, it could be an average of a bunch of scores that are really close together or a bunch of scores that are really far apart. Consistency is a measure of how close together they are. High consistency, it means that the scores were pretty much the same. People are seeing pretty much the same person. Low consistency means they're all over the place. They're seeing a different person, if you like it. They're experiencing you in a different way. And again, later in the program, we'll talk about the implications of that and how you use it. Okay, what you're looking generally is for something around above 25%. So it's the right-hand side of that. Okay, let's get into your actual scores. Please turn to this page, which is page 7. Okay. Now, before you do anything else, thinking about what I just said, I want you to look at that and think of the people who fed back in you and think, knowing these people and know the relationship I have with them, what am I really doing well right now? What is it that where I'm knocking it out of the park? And put an X against the one where you say, wow, I'm pretty proud of that. That's the best score on there. Best score would be smaller gap between importance and level of demonstration. It would be a higher level of demonstration, for example. It would be higher level of demonstration and maybe into that benchmark box. But just I want to encourage you to look, before we start looking at the areas you could improve in, what are the areas where you're really already doing a great job? Because it's important to know your strengths too. So I'll go quiet for about 30 seconds, which is not enough time. You need to visit this outside of the recording. And or outside of this session, put on the recording. And when I say look for the places where you're doing a good job, pause the recording and spend some time looking at it. But just spend 30 seconds and figure, what's the one I'm really, really proud of while I have a drink of water. So as I say, spend some time after the session just looking at what am I doing well. It's really important that you have the awareness to know what is it, how is it people experience me, and what are the things I do really well, because those are your particular strengths. Let's go slightly dark side and very, very quickly. Thinking of the relationship you have with those people, thinking of the relationship you'd like to have with those people, I want you to think, what is the scale on there? If we only had time to look at one scale, which is the scale on there that you think is the most important one for you to pay attention to? So look at it and see, what's the one that's most important? It might be the base gap. It might be the lowest level of demonstration. It might be the one where you say, wow, I thought I was more self-aware than that. I thought I was seen as more authentic. What jumps out at you as being the most important one? And again, I'm only giving you 30 seconds because of our time on here. But you do want to spend some time with this. There's some great information in there. Take 30 seconds just to see which scale should you be looking at when we turn over the page. And if you're listening to the recording, it's a good place to pause and spend some time on it. So let's imagine, I'm going to imagine that, let me look as this guy. Let's say that, for example, the one that concerned me in the sample was inspiring performance, because it has a 3.5 or 3.1 level of demonstration, a 4.4 level of importance. So there's a pretty big gap. And I think it's important as a leader that I inspire people. What I want you to do then, if you're looking at your own report, go to whichever scale it is that you selected. So go over the page and go to whichever scale it is that you selected. I'm going to go straight down into the inspiring performance piece, okay? And this is what you'll be looking at. And in the sample report, you can see, first off, pretty much everything is green, okay? Now, what I would encourage you to do, if you do have a scale that's like this, go back into the report, revisit some of the places that you've got results that are a little bit more encouraging, okay? And spend some time with those so that when you go to look at this, that you can take the attitude, which is very important, that this is an opportunity. I now know how it is that people want me to show up, what's important to them. I now know how they see me, so I have an opportunity to do something. And again, I'm going to ask you to ask yourself a question. As you look at that scale, and you look at those 7 items, if you only had time to look at one of them, which do you think would be the most important one for you to pay attention to? Okay, so just take a moment and just look and say, if I was looking at this scale, which is the most important one for me to pay attention to? And this would be a good place to pause it if you're looking at the recording or you're revisiting, and to spend some time looking at that, which is the most important one. And let me just, for the heck of it, let me say that I said provides constructive feedback and performance, okay? So that's the one I'm going to look at. As you're looking at that item, you want to think, what does that mean to me? What do they mean provides constructive feedback on behavior and performance? What does that mean in my context? What might they be looking for that I'm not demonstrating? What is the reason that they're not seeing me demonstrate that? And be honest with yourself, am I actually showing up and providing constructive feedback on behavior and performance? And they're just not seeing it, or am I just not doing that? Mea culpa, I'm just not quite getting that done. Think about it. And as you think about and you work through, think, what could I do about it? Is this important to me? Because if it's important to me that I make some change with this, if it's important enough to you, what can you do? And as you think through this, there's a section in your report that gives you space to put in any insights, thoughts that you might have, any actions, and any benefits. Now, by actions, I mean, if you decide that you're going to change stuff, for example, providing constructive feedback on a regular basis, I'm going to call each of my folks in and I'm going to tell them all of the great things that they're doing. And you might put that down in actions. I would suggest to you, make sure you know why that's good to you. What's in it for me? What's in it for you? Because honestly, if you don't write down, this is going to improve the relationship with these people and get better results for me, and so it's going to make my life easier or more effective or me a better leader, if you don't have a compelling reason to do it, you're not going to do it. So anytime you decide I'm going to make some change, you should identify why you should make that change. So as you think through that, and this may be a process of days where you're thinking, you know, how are they not seeing that, or how does that play out in the workplace? And perhaps if you're puzzled by the behavior you're looking at, you might go to one of those people in the group and say, not bringing them a report, but saying, hey, listen, I got some great feedback. And one of the things that puzzles me is, have you any suggestions on how I might show up in a way that demonstrates that better? And so it's really a question of, do I demonstrate the behavior that they're looking for? Okay. If I don't, do I care? If I care, what can I do about it? If I do demonstrate it, well then why are they not seeing it? And what can I do about it? Okay. And again, as I say, getting it down on paper is really important. Now, normally speaking, if I was feeding back a report like this, we'd spend 90 minutes together one-on-one, and we'd work through this. This is a slightly different situation with, let me see, 100 and something people going through the reports right now. So you saw what I did there. First off, I said, which scale is most important? And then I said, inside that, which item is most important? And then I said, and what can you do about it? What are the actions? Now, here's where if you're serious about this, there's some work. After this session is over, I suggest you go back and you basically, as they say on the shampoo bottle, you rinse and repeat. So you go back and you look at the next scale and you work your way down and you try to find what are the 2 or 3 themes that are coming out here that I really need to pay attention to. And by the way, some of you will have some really great qualitative feedback in there that'll be very useful. After each of the scales, people are given an opportunity to give some free text feedback on the where they want to flesh out, to give them an opportunity to flesh out what it is they want to feedback on self-awareness, awareness of others, and so on and so forth. So we're going to send you a development tips workbook so that it's like a dictionary of development suggestions that you can use for developing. If you look at one of these items, you say, I can't figure out what I can do next. We're going to give you something that has some suggestions for every one of those. But this process for you is a very personal process. Okay, it's one where you need to spend some time with the report and cycle through it. So again, let me tell you what the approach I suggest is. 1, what's the most important scale right now? What's the most important item in that scale? Is it important to me that there's a gap? What am I going to do about it? And when you've got some action fleshed out and you've got a who, where, when, why on it, well, then you're going to go back again and say, okay, what's the next most important one? And really, remember, this is not just some set of meaningful numbers, meaningless numbers. This is how people experience you. And you have an opportunity to change it. Change your behavior, you change the way you impact people. One other thing I'm going to mention to you about the report, and as I say, I can't dive into the detail that I would like to in the time we have available, but you're getting the essence of how to read the report, and we're going to send you a development tips workbook as well. One other thing I want to mention to you, one of the single most emotionally intelligent acts that you can commit is to go back to the people that fed back to you and just say, thank you. On the page, back page, let me see, on page 20 of your report, there's an approach, a structured approach for doing that. But look, at the very minimum, go back to the people who fed back and say, thank you very much. That was really valuable. I got a lot out of that. And if you need clarification with some of them to feel comfortable, you might say, can you give me an idea? Here's some of the feedback I got. Can you help me understand what people might be saying and what I might do about that? But at a minimum, go back and thank them. So that's your report, and that's a really quick walk through it. By all means, ask questions at the end. By all means, ask questions in the group. If you're diving into your report and you have any questions, get into the group and ask them, and we'll answer all of your questions. So I'm going to go back to the presentation and carry on from this point, because there are some other bits and pieces I want to do. So let me make a point. The report was a waste of your time and the people who fed back on you, unless you make even one change. The way you show up, you saw it there with a good boss, bad boss. Are there gaps there? Are there places where you're having an impact that you don't want to have? If so, what can you do about it? The choice is yours. This is, actually, let me ask you, let me get the chat up there. Let me ask you, does anybody know who this person is? Where's my chat gone? Oh, I've lost my chat box, blasted. Darn, I cannot see my chat box because I just want to see if anybody recognizes it. Chat, there we go. Anybody recognize this guy? Just put it up on the screen if you know. Carl Jung. He does look like Carl Jung, doesn't he? He's very much of that era. In fact, this is a guy who the man who invented dynamite, a guy called Alfred Nobel. And he made a fortune. And I mean, when I talk about a fortune, I'm talking about in today's money, back in the 1800s, this man would have been worth about $300–400 million. And he made it by inventing dynamite. And until he invented dynamite, the best explosive that we had was nitroglycerin. And if you've seen the movies, nitroglycerin is highly unstable. You drop a drop of it and boom. And no, Bryn, it's not Donald Trump Sr. You drop it and it was very unstable, it was very dangerous. And he found that you could mix certain clays with it and create dynamite, and you could handle it safely until you put a match to it. And he made a fortune. In 1888, his brother Ludwig died. The following morning, Alfred Nobel picked up the newspaper and realized that the people, or the journalists, had made a mistake, and they thought it was Alfred Nobel who died. And for those of you who have French that's as bad as mine, let me tell you that les marchands de la mort et mort means the merchant of death has died. He read his own obituary. And the obituary said that the man who has been single-handedly responsible for killing more humans since the beginning of time has passed away today. Now, if you can imagine, at that point in time, that was his legacy. And it shocked him so much that a couple of years later in 1896, without telling his family or his relatives, he put 90% of his fortune, that was worth about $250 million in today's money, into a fund that established the Nobel Peace Prize. And not a lot of people don't connect Nobel, who created dynamite and killed more people single-mindedly or single-handedly in history, according to journalists, with the Nobel Peace Prize. At a point in time, he said, oh no, this is not who I want to be. This is not where I want to go to, okay? This is not what I want to remember for. And he changed his life. He turned it on a dime by the action he took. Any one of us can do that at any moment in time. And I want to encourage you now, grab a pen and paper, and I'm going to ask you to think about where do you want to be at the end of this program? Who do you want to be? What sort of leader or person do you want to be? What sort of leader, what sort of employee, what sort of parent, what sort of person do you want to be? Because just by getting a snapshot of who it is you want to become, you prime your brain to start seeking ways to help you do that. This is a very, very difficult to read book, but essentially what she says is the moment you start to think about where you want to go, the brain starts creating a path to get there. So we're going to take 2 or 3 minutes now, and I want you to think about what sort of leader, what sort of person do you want to be? And we're going to do an exercise. And please, please, don't sit here passively with me when we go through this. I'm going to ask you to put the pen to paper in a moment. And I'm going to ask you to project yourself forward 5 years, 3 years if you like. And I want you to think about yourself as a person, as a leader. And I'm going to ask you to put pen to paper and write down, it is whatever date today is, May 16, 2023, and I am. I want you to write what sort of leader, what sort of person, particularly in respect of your emotional intelligence capability, what do you look like 5 years from now if your best predictions for what you want from this program worked out? So if everything went really well and you became the sort of person that you wanted to become when you signed up for this program, what does that look like? Write it in the present tense. Don't start yet. Write it in the present tense. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, put your pen to your paper. And when I say go, just start writing. Don't stop writing even if you run out of juice. If you run out of things to say, keep writing with, I've run out of things to say, but keep your pen on the paper. And just keep writing. And when the flow of thought comes up again, start writing again. No punctuation, no grammar, no spell checks, no heavy thinking, stream of consciousness. So put your pen to paper. It is May 16, 2023, and I am. And start writing now. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes just to write that. And keep writing, okay? So I'm going to go quiet for 2 minutes. Don't be stopping to check your grammar. Don't be stopping to think. Just keep the pen moving. And if you dry up, just write, I've dried up. I have nothing to say. Just keep the pen going. About a minute in. Again, just keep this going. I'll explain the rationale in a few moments. Okay, so stop there. And in fact, you can quickly read over what you've just written. And I'll make a few comments in the background. First, 2 minutes is too short for that exercise. And once is too few times to do it. I'm going to encourage you between now and next week to do it a few more times. And just really just to let it flow out of you. Keeping the pen on the paper just encourages a stream of consciousness thing. It encourages you to get down things that otherwise wouldn't come out if you are parsing and thinking logically. So I'll encourage you after today's session to put that away maybe overnight and then to come back and do the exercise again. But give yourself 5 or 6 or 7 minutes just to flow through that. And we're going to build that into something bigger as we work next week. So that's why I'm going to ask you in between sessions to spend some more time with it. Because once you start to get that sense, and once you start to prime, remember your predictive brain, once you start to tell it what it is that is likely to happen, and you start to set that sense of where you want to go, that intention, well, then your brain starts about creating the conditions to make it happen. One of the things we'll do throughout this program is I'm going to encourage you to look at how are you doing against this, if you like, vision that we're going to create out of that bit of journaling. And again, there's a lot of research, as you can see on the screen there, that shows that just encouraging you, just looking at your progress against these sort of intention, these sort of goals, has a positive impact upon helping them come to pass. So one of the pieces of homework that I'm going to ask you to do before next week is going to be to do more of that journaling. But let me, in the interest of getting you out on the time I said, let's do a practice. Now, many of you are sitting in an office, and it may not be practical for you to close your eyes, but there is, while I find with this particular practice, it's really, really valuable to close your eyes. It's not by any means essential. If you're sitting in an office where it's not practical to do so, sit up, plant your feet on the ground, put your hand in your lap, your hands in your lap symmetrically, and be comfortable. Kind of shake it out loose a little bit. And as I'm talking, just very briefly, bring your attention to your seat and your feet. And just quickly, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this part. Just notice your seat and your feet, and notice the sensation of sitting on a chair. We're speeding that up just slightly, so just notice that you can notice. And if it's possible for you where you are, you can close your eyes. If it's not, just allow your eyes to drop down to a couple of feet in front of you with a soft focus. And we're going to start doing what we did last week, and that's just paying attention to the breath. And I'll give you instructions on this as we go for the people who haven't been in, weren't in last week's session. So please just close your eyes and bring attention to your breath going in and out of your body. Notice the breath as it goes in through the nose. Maybe you're feeling it a little bit cooler at the nose. Your chest and your stomach rise. And then as it goes out, chest and stomach falls. Back out through the nose, slightly warmer. And just follow the cycle of the breath in and out. And do that for a few seconds. Just see if you can stay with the breath all of the way in and all of the way out. And at some stage, you're likely to notice, oh, I'm no longer focused on the breath. That's okay. As we said last week, the intention here is not to develop this laser grip or this vice-like grip upon the breath, but rather follow, pay attention to the breath, and then notice when you've lost attention. So if you suddenly notice, oh, my mind was elsewhere, just notice I'm distracted and return your attention back to the breath and carry on. And if that happens 100 times over a few minutes, just following the breath in, following the breath out. If you get distracted, just distracted, and carry on. And let's do that just for maybe 2 minutes now. I'll go quiet for 2 minutes. And don't get frustrated, just allow the breath in and out. Anytime you're distracted, notice the distraction and carry on. Not looking for any special experience. Just watching the breath going in, going out, and being aware when you lose attention to the breath, returning the breath back again and carrying on, repeating the cycle. And now, as you're sitting and starting to relax into this, I want you to connect with an intention for this practice. Always at the beginning of a practice, I'll encourage you to have an intention, not a goal, but set a kind of a general direction. The intention of this practice is become a little bit more aware of what's going on in our body, developing awareness of what's going on in each of the parts of the body. And next week, we're going to talk about why this is. So as we go through this, not looking for any special experience, nothing unusual to happen. I'm just going to encourage you to track through different parts of your body and notice sensations that are going on there. So notice first off that your abdomen is rising and falling gently with the breath. Don't want you to change it, I just want you to notice it's happening. Bring attention to it. Now, using your attention as if it was a beam of light, let's move it to different parts of the body. I'm going to ask you to do something unusual. Bring your attention to the big toes on your feet. I don't mean visualize them. I mean just notice what sensations are going on at the large toes of your feet. Allow your attention to drop down. And now into all of the toes. Is there tingling? Is there hot? Is there cold? There may be nothing at all. Just notice what there is to notice. Sense into the soles of the feet and the heels. Now up onto the top of the feet. No analysis, just noticing if there are any sensations. Noticing what there is to notice. And if there's nothing, that's okay. Again, I'll say it again, just notice. Now, as we work through different parts of the body, if you notice any tension or stiffness, just let it go, let it dissolve. So now shift the beam of your attention up to your ankles. What sensations are there? And your lower legs, your calves and your shins. So many nerve endings there. What is there to notice? Not creating anything, not visualizing, just noticing if there's anything that tells you that you have calves. Bring your attention up to your knees, to your thighs. There may be sensations of contact between your clothing and your skin. Maybe there's pulsing, tingling, warmth. Just notice whatever's going on there. There's no good or bad experience. Just notice the sensations in your thighs and the way that your thighs connect up to your hips and your pelvis. How do you know you're sitting in the chair? What sensations tell you? Now bring your attention to the right hip, the left hip. I'm simply relaxing into noticing whatever is going on wherever you bring your attention. Notice that your amazing brain can allow you to reach out and sense into whatever is going in any part of your body. Now bring your awareness up to the lower back and the middle of your back. What's there? Any tension? Any sensations? Any hot or cold? to your shoulders. We very frequently carry tension in our shoulders. If you notice that, just let it go. Now allow your attention to scan down over the front of your body, your chest, which is rising and falling as you breathe. Your abdomen, which is doing the same. Just watching whatever sensations might be waiting there for you. And maybe noticing the way those sensations change even as you breathe. Now, if this is your first time doing this, you might become restless or worry you're not doing it right, or your mind might slip into distracting thoughts. Don't worry about it. Again, if you get thoughts, you get distracted, just notice that. This is about noticing. Be easy on yourself. It's completely normal. Just acknowledge the distractions and how they affect your ability to watch the body. And then, without any judgment, just bring your attention back to wherever you had intended it would be. Now bring your attention to your fingers and your hands. And notice that there's so many nerve endings there that when you reach out your attention, you can feel what's going on there. Scan the attention from the hands up the lower arms, upper arms, up to the shoulders. And now up to your head and face. In turn, bringing your attention to your jaw and your chin, your mouth, your lips, surface of your nose. Just sensing into the sensations from your face. Spend a few seconds just noticing the sensations around your head and your face, the top of your scalp, the back of your head. So now that we've scanned the whole body, see if, while you're paying attention to the head and the neck, if you can start to reach that attention back down through the arms and the chest and the back, down to your pelvis and your legs and your feet, and holding your entire body in attention and just allowing whatever comes up, come up. Sometimes there'll be lots of competing sensations. Sometimes the body will be strangely quiet. That's okay. Just allow yourself to notice that you can notice. And just to sit and allow yourself to drink in the awareness of your body. To notice any sensations that call to your attention. Allow your body and your mind just to let go and relax a little bit insofar as it's possible. Just sitting quietly and calmly. Okay, so letting go of the body, let's bring the attention just back to our breath, which has been continuing all the time. And just start again, just to notice the breath going in at the nostrils. Follow it down as it inflates your chest and your abdomen. Noticing the abdomen and the chest collapsing as you breathe out. And follow just 2 or 3 breaths and see if you can follow the full cycle in or out. Just noticing when you get distracted and carrying on. Okay, take one last breath. If your eyes were closed, look up, look around, and let's move on. Okay, so that was a slightly faster than usual version of a practice that we're going to talk about, really important practice in this session. And we're going to talk about it over the next couple of weeks and how the neuroscience behind it and how it fits into managing stress and resilience and difficult emotions and so on. We're going to send you this week a copy of a guided meditation that walks you through the body scan. And I'd encourage you to try it a couple of times during the week, just so that you can get some sense of the way it operates. But notice the way we're building here. Each of these individual practices, I said, are like Lego bricks. We started with the 6 breaths and the seat and feet, and we set an intention to breath. And we've added an extra brick on there. And this is a great piece for relaxation. If we had time, I'd see how relaxed you're finding it. And it's great for getting in touch with emotions physically. And apologies, somebody's just decided to update about 77 blasted files on Dropbox, and so it's binging away there in the background. And it's a great way of letting go of feelings so that you can just relax a little bit. But we're going to use this a little bit more as we move on. And I'm going to send you, when I send you up this, or send you this week's updated booklet, it'll have some of the instructions for this. Let me bring Aoife back in very, very briefly, just to talk about a few things that are going on in the group. And I see, in fact, that I'm out of date on the right-hand side. 285 of you have signed up. If you haven't signed up yet, this is where we're putting lots of our communication with you. Aoife, do you want to just talk briefly about anything we
yeah, definitely. I will post a link into the chat box there again. But yeah, so the reaction to our LinkedIn group's also been great, and we really want to encourage our attendees, especially now that we're diving deeper into the content. A lot of you have questions about the report and you want to know how to work through different pieces. This is a really good place to post those questions. So, because it's very likely that if you have this question, someone else does as well. So feel free to pose questions in there. Deiric and I are on there multiple times a day. We can respond to you in a way that everyone can get that information as well. And, feel free to let us know. Deiric blogs and puts out different content around leadership and mindfulness and EI. So we're going to be sharing that content in there as well. But if you have a particular topic or issue at your organization that you'd like him to address, feel free to put a note in there that you'd like him to talk a little more about the neuroscience piece. We posted a quick bonus session this week on your brain, on mindfulness. After session 1, we had a lot of folks come back and ask, I really want to know more about the inner workings and really how our brains are during these states. So Deiric recorded a bonus session in there as well. Now, how LinkedIn groups are laid out, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control. So just feel free to visit the group and scroll through so you can see everything that we've posted there over the last 2 weeks. There's been a lot, but there's a lot of good stuff in there for you guys to see. Now, Deiric, I'm just conscious of the time. I know folks have to run off, so we do have 1 or 2 kind of big questions that, a good few people have asked. Are we okay?
Can I pause you on the questions? And what I'm going to do, because I see a few people commenting that they need to move, I'm going to do the last comments, and then we can stay on as long as, for people who are staying on, can stay on. We can stay on as long as they want for the questions, but also then the questions will be on a recording. So Aoife just made this point. We'll be updating this and giving you the practices from this week into the group. That's where you'll get the links. Okay. Homework. God, I hate that expression, but I'm saying it with my tongue in the cheek. If you haven't finished your report, please get it done and look it over with the recording, because it's going to be important for next week. Think and journal upon the leader or person you'd like to be. And some of the prompts that you might consider is, when you look 5 years hence, how do you want to make people feel? And by the way, we'll send you all this. How do people respond to you now? What's your why? I'll share a take from Simon Sinek with you. So here are some things that just to get you thinking about, where does I want to go with this stuff? Because you're not doing it. I was going to say you're not doing it for the good of your health. You probably are. But you're not doing it just for fun. You're doing it with some intent. And this might help to guide you a little bit. Other thing, consider downloading the Potential Project app. Here's what I challenge you. Download that app. Okay, it's $1.99, and set up the reminder system on it. And every time it dings, stop and do that purposeful pause. Just very briefly, in a minute, bring attention to your seat and your feet. Breathe a little bit, and or do the 6 breaths, and then just follow 1 or 2 mindful breaths, and just notice and be, the the difference that it makes to you. Report that back in the group. One final thing, start making use of your daily rituals as practices. For example, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. Oh, by the way, watch out for the interviews we have with our gurus. Not that they like to be called gurus, but we had one with Rich Fernandez last week, and we saw great people coming up, real gurus in this area. Here's one that you can look at. Gentlemen, you can use your shaving. Gentlemen and ladies, you can use your toothbrushing. Most of us brush our teeth in the morning. That's a great opportunity for a meditation. And by a meditation, I mean just simply a mindfulness exercise. Notice and see if you can keep your attention as you brush your teeth from start to finish. And if you lose attention on brushing the teeth and you find yourself thinking about something else, just, oh, I've been distracted, and bring it back again. It is no less valuable in developing your self-awareness than sitting down on a cushion or sitting down on a chair and doing this. So use either brushing your teeth, or gentlemen, you can use shaving your face or whatever, and just bring attention to one of the things that you normally do habitually on autopilot. So if you can follow, as I say, your toothbrushing as if you were following your breath, that is just as useful to you as sitting down and spending some formal meditation time. Next time we're going to talk about self-confidence, self-awareness, emotional awareness, and we'll give you some context on the body scan, and we'll give you 2 more core practices to integrate. So for those people who, and apologies, I'm a few minutes late again, have to run off, thank you very much for spending the time. Please do come back to the recording again and use it for looking at your report. Now, Aoife, let's dive into the questions, and we can stay as long on this as people want to stay. Perfect.
Thanks, Deiric. Okay, so one question that we received from a lot of folks was, can we talk a little bit about, so the differences between the raters scores of an individual and your own self-assessment results. Okay. So does that have to do anything to do with a negative self-perception? And is there tips for working through when someone's self-assessment tends to be, orange and yellow, and their report back from their raters was primarily green? How would you recommend someone work through that, and why would that be?
Yeah, that this is very, to the folks that have asked this question, this is a question that comes up all the time. In most situations, not all situations, in most situations, I find in these reports that the harshest critic of an individual is themselves. Very frequently, we are tougher on ourselves in rating ourselves than the people around us. We don't give ourselves credit for the things that we do really well, and we don't rate those highly enough, and we really hammer ourselves on things that we feel that we don't do particularly well. So it's not unusual. It's not by any means every single time, but it's not unusual for people to have an assessment where they're beating themselves up a bit. Only you would know if that's coming from a negative self-image, whether it's coming from a position where you're continually beating yourself up on this recurring image or a recurring theme in your life, and only you will know if that's the situation. But with folks even who have absolutely no negative self-image, they may just not have sufficient self-awareness to know how they show up in the world. And so what I would encourage you is think, when you look at all of the greens or whatever you're getting from the people who feedback on you, just think, how well do these people know me? And the familiarity scale gives you that. If they know you well enough to be able to feedback, and they say, hey, you do this really well, and you do this really well, and you do this really well, and you haven't thought that before, you really, really need to think, is my image of myself correct? Am I doing myself a disservice? And if so, correct that image. Start to take some credit for the things that other people are seeing you do well, that you're harsh upon yourself. And by the way, you will tend to be harshest upon yourself with those things that are really important to you. The things that you really care about, you'll tend to hammer yourself on. So you're probably already better on a lot of the things that you really care about than you even realize. So allow the people who are feeding back on you to enhance your self-awareness, to enhance your awareness of your strengths. But also, don't be afraid to allow them to enhance your awareness of any blind spots. If you get a report that has a lot of oranges or a lot of red, be really thankful. Seriously, it's an opportunity. Because here was the perceptions that they had before you did this report. Here's the perceptions they have right now. And if nothing changes, that's the way it stays. So you've had a unique opportunity to look through the eyes of other people and see how do you show up. And in those areas where, let's say, where it's less than you would have liked, look at them and say, is that because either I'm not demonstrating that behavior, and if so, do I care to? And if I do care to, what, how am I going to do that? And or is it I'm demonstrating it and somehow they don't see it? And if they don't see it, that's affecting their perception. And if you care about that, again, how can I change that? How can I show them that I have a greater awareness of my mood and emotions? How can I show them that I care enough to give them support and so on? So just going back, however, to the specific question, don't be afraid to question your own judgment of yourself. Our self-awareness has a high reputation for being generally a poor source of information on how we show up in the world. It's not a good predictor of how people experience us. So absolutely, use it to fix your view of yourself. Use what people are feeding back and to fix a view of yourself and change how you show up. Now, apologies that we can't go into deep, but we can go deep on the group. So please, when you drop into group, ask questions, and we may post even some video responses back to those. Don't be afraid to explore these in more depth, but I hope that helps with that question.
That's great, thank you. And then just to clarify, I answered in our Q&A section, but we had some folks asking, what is that small box in each of the behaviors between importance and the others? So can we just explain a little about that benchmark, Deiric?
Absolutely. Let me just drop out here. And are you seeing my screen? You are. Okay. So let me just go right back to the beginning. Yeah, I went over this very, very quickly because honestly, in the context of this, it's a really, really good feature and it's a lovely thing to have. In the context of our program here today, I'm really more interested in giving you the comparison between the expectation or the level of importance and the level of demonstration. But let me talk about this. So we're talking about this box here, right, Eva?
Yep.
Okay. This box is a representation of the typical range of scores that people taking this assessment tend to achieve. So it's a way of comparing this demonstrated level. So let's say you have 3, 4, 5 colleagues that fed back and they've said, we see you demonstrating on self-awareness an average of about 3.8 out of 5. So what's that, 76%, is it? My mathematics, dreadful. Okay. And that's great. So it's telling you, hey, here's the level of demonstration. Here's what we expect. This box here allows you to compare yourself with everybody else who completes this assessment. If that demonstrated score is below that box, it means it's below, you score less on that than is typical of most people who complete this assessment. If you score inside it, your score is about the same as most people who complete the assessment. And if it's to the right of it, it's higher. Now, the way that shows out in the individual results is here. Oh, yeah, let me get that out of the way. The way it shows here is you'll notice that you've got the arrow here. So let's say is aware of their strengths and limitations. Here's one where that 3.9 score is inside that box. In other words, that person scored 3.9, and that's about the same as most people who take the assessment. Here, that person scored 3.2, and because the arrow is pointing down, it means that person scored less than is typical of people taking the assessment. So it's a way of giving you a second dimension, a second look at, a second dimension. The first one gives you what do people that I'm working with day to day expect of me and how do I compare? And then how does what they see me demonstrate day to day compare to other people in the world? And again, we might visit that a little bit more in the group in more detail. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Great. Okay, I just have 1 or 2 more. So we do have, someone's asking, I'd like to be able to use these reports in a client engagement. Can I do that?
I'm assuming you don't mean use your own report in a client engagement. I use my own personal report in a client engagement, when I'm showing people how this works, because it makes them realize that if I'm not afraid of showing my results, they should be afraid of seeing their results. But I'm assuming that you mean can you use these reports with your clients? And I'll take that outside and maybe take it into the group. Yes, to use the reports with your clients, you need to become a certified practitioner with Genos. So you go through a 2-day certification or an online certification, and we train you up in how to understand the reports, set up projects, and so on and so forth. But let me take that. Let me ask you to post that, and Aoife will remember to get me to do this, to post that into the group, and I'll deal with it there. But yeah, absolutely. I would encourage you, if you're doing any sort of coaching, consulting, and training, it's a fabulous tool for giving you an insight into the before and the after. What do I need to get developed? Then do the coaching, consulting, training, and then did it move the needle? What difference did it make?
Right.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. So Deiric, the rest of the questions we had were around getting access to the reports, and I was able to answer a lot of those in the Q&A chat box.
Okay.
If anyone is not sure if their raters have completed it, if they have any concerns, my email is in the Q&A or in the chat box there, and you can also post in the LinkedIn group, and we'll make sure that you have access to those as well.
Okay.
That is it for questions for today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Aoife. Thanks a million. And thank you, folks, for staying with it and staying with the program. Now, one final thing I'm going to say before I say goodbye. If you're feeling that, oh, man, I'm not on top of the report yet, don't worry. Normally, you get about 90 minutes one-on-one to do this. It's different. Use the group. Get in there and use the group and ask the questions. We'll get you to a point where you're entirely comfortable. So until we see you next week, I wish you all the very, very best, and we'll send you on details of your homework. So have a great week. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.